It's the story which has dominated the front pages all week, implicating everyone from the Prime Minister to Prince Andrew. China. The row has deepened over the abandonment of the spying trial, with Sir Keir Starmer facing questions after a line from Labor's manifesto appeared in a witness statement. And now China is threatening consequences if the new mega embassy isn't approved, I should say, in London. To discuss this, I'm pleased to welcome former leader of the Conservative Party and MP for Chingford and Woodford Green, Sir Iain Duncan Smith. Iain, an absolute delight to have you on. Can you let me know what is the latest in this ongoing saga and what's your take on it?
Well, this whole saga is because of the Labour government's obsession with having to do a trade arrangement, trade deal, whatever you want to call it, with China. So the spy saga, where these people were meant to be prosecuted, collapsed. We now know quite a lot of detail why it collapsed, and a lot of that is to do with the Labour government's behaviour with the Crime Prosecution Service. What actually happened was that they were required to hand a continuance notice, really, to the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution, and also the CPS. And that all that was required as a result of a case that had happened just before was that they needed to say, essentially, that China posed a continuing threat. They didn't do that for 4 months. They got bogged down in just not answering the CPS. Finally, in the end, they put together a series of notes, didn't meet the requirement. And worse than that, we now know from the documents released, they actually just pulled something out of the Labour manifesto, talking some nonsense about, deal with them in one way or the other. Complete idiocy. It had nothing to do with the case. And that was their way of saying basically they didn't want the prosecution to go ahead. And so the CPS decided they couldn't proceed with this and they dropped it. Now, you can argue the CPS might have made more effort to go and do it. But the truth is, the government should have gone hard on this and made it very clear China's a threat. And they're so desperate about upsetting the Chinese, that's really where the problem arose. And now we've got the embassy now, this ridiculous super embassy, which will have another 200 spies threatening lots of British citizens, myself included. I'm sanctioned by the Chinese government, but also a lot of Hong Kong dissidents who have fled. And we've got these illegal police stations. Government doesn't do anything about it. So it's a complete mess. It's the biggest threat we face since the ending of the Cold War, is the growth and power and threatening nature of China, both in China and externally.
That's a really interesting comment, and that's something that we were actually talking about on this show last week. It feels to me, and like we're talking a lot about the Middle East, we're talking a lot about the threat from Russia, but it doesn't feel like we are serious enough about the geopolitical threat from China. Do you think that's reasonable? And if so, how do we raise the alarm more around what could be a very serious situation in the Taiwan Strait before the decade is out?
Yeah, well, let's just deal with what China actually does and who it's allied with. I mean, right now, I would call it the axis of totalitarian states are all in league with each other. North Korea, China, Russia, Iran are the key players in this, but there are others like Myanmar, which has got this terrible regime involved. Now, China internally is unbelievably brutal. It practices wide-scale slave labor. We buy products over here, particularly solar arrays, that are made using slave labor. They're carrying out what I believe to be a genocide in Xinjiang, where they take the men and they're put into slave labor camps, millions of them. And also they take the women and forcibly sterilize them. The birth rate in Xinjiang has gone off the edge of a cliff. And the young children are taken to re-education camps where they learn to be Han Chinese, not Uyghur. So they have to stop using their own language. They have to start speaking essentially in Mandarin and at the same time learn all about what it is to be a Chinese citizen. But they do the same in Tibet. There's 250,000 men have gone into slave labor in Tibet. They're doing it now in Outer Mongolia, which is a part of China. So it goes on. So that's just what they do in China. They're threatening Taiwan. But the main thing is, just think about this for a second. Russia could never have invaded Ukraine had they not had the backing of China. China finances Russia at the moment. It buys huge amounts of its oil and gas. It makes sure that they're not short of weapons. It did the rapprochement with North Korea. North Korea now provides millions of artillery rounds and everything else they can provide, small arms, etc. They've even got 10,000 or so troops sitting in that war as well. Then you've got Iran. Iran's been supplying them with massive amounts of these drones. Also, you have to say that the whole attack in Gaza, I believe, was partly due to taking the pressure off Russia, where Iranian-backed militias actually brutally, in case of Hamas, attacked and murdered, a couple of thousand Israelis and took a lot of prisoners. And the point is that all of that started, I believe, as part of this incredible support network for Russia, which is at the heart China. And one last point. China now has about 130 times the capacity to build naval ships than America does and Europe. And any one shipyard in China at the moment builds more naval ships than the whole of the United States. You tell me we aren't seeing the development of a threat right in front of us, and all we want to do is get on bended knee and kiss the backside of China. That seems to be the Labour Party policy.
Yeah, I mean, Iain, hi. This is Dr. René Hundekamp. It's really interesting listening to what you say. I'm assuming that we would, under any other circumstances, if somebody told us what you've just told us goes on in China, we would actually have nothing to do with this regime. So one has to assume that we are so inveigled with them from an economic point of view that we need to do some business with them. So if you were to sit down with Keir Starmer this week and you had to give him 3 reasons or 3 non-negotiables as to path our way forward with China, what would they be?
Well, stop the policy, first of all, of trying to get a trade arrangement. Right now, we have a £40 billion deficit in trade with China. So China sells us vast amounts of goods, more than we do. And the second thing he has to do is to stop them flooding our market with cheap batteries, cheap solar arrays, and most importantly, cheap electric cars. We won't have a car industry if they do this trade arrangement with China, because they'll just dump. They don't want to trade with us. They want to dump all their overproduced goods at the moment. That will kill the car industry off, and many others too. And the final thing is, we've got to recognize that we now have to start leading the way in the West, to recognize the threat that is posed to us and our way of life. China had this big meeting in Shanghai, I think it was about 2 months ago. And there they had all of these gangsters from North Korea, from Russia and Iran, I believe. But he's arm in arm with the North Korean president, who murders more people in North Korea you'd imagine, and the Russian president, Putin. And he says, we will form a new world order. Honestly, the beauty of totalitarian leaders is they always tell you what they're going to do. It's us, the West, that doesn't want to believe them. And we're appeasing them at the moment, and we shouldn't do it. We should say we're going to reshore a lot of our industry, start bringing stuff back, and make sure that we really, really know who our real threat and enemy is from, and it's from China and Russia and its allies.
So, Iain, it's so interesting because we had a bit of a debate about this on the panel earlier, and one of our panellists asked me, was I prepared to just cut off trade with China and the consequences of that? It sounds to me like the answer to that from your perspective is yes, we must.
Well, the answer is very simple. It's time we started working with countries that have democracies and have the rule of law and are likely to treat your businesses okay. I mean, I've lost count of the number of companies that have come to me and said that they backed out of China now because you go there, they steal your IP, they reproduce your products without telling you, and so it goes on. I mean, there are countries like India we should be doing much more with. I see that Apple has started moving their iPhone production into India at the moment, because at least they have the rule of law there and they have a democracy. And there are other countries, a part of the Commonwealth, many of the Commonwealth are actually likely to be helpful to us in this particular case. And that's really what we're talking about. Start moving our trade, our business, to countries that we know will respond to proper law and proper process. And that is not China, and it's not Russia, it's not this axis. But we won't do it. Why? Because businesses rushed over there in the hope of cheap trade, that they could get cheap labor, didn't ask too many questions about slave labor. They break all the WTO rules about subsidizing. So yet we turn a blind eye to China, and we've got to stop doing it. We've got to say, look, you step up to the rules, we don't do business with you. And we're going to bring our industry back, or bring it to countries that we know we can trade with inundated with Chinese students at the moment, coming in, learning, postgrad students, going on to security contracts. How stupid is that? Ending up going straight back to China with details. I mean, honestly, governments have been really stupid about this, and this is like the 1930s all over again. We didn't want to listen, and in the end, 60 million people died, and we don't want to reach that, so we've got to start moving now.
Staggering.
Well, that's, I think, very powerful and poignant words to leave our audience with, Sir Iain. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, and hopefully more politicians heed your message.